Okay, so finally, we got to talk about the defensive line for Oklahoma. This is probably one of the biggest position groups for the Sooners going into the 2024 season and what they're able to do going into the SEC. But the Oklahoma Sooners got a huge win on the defensive line in terms of Jaden Jackson being nominated for a preseason freshman All-American list. And he's in company with elite dudes. And here's what I mean by this. Jaden Jackson, coming out of high school, he was highly regarded by a lot of schools. He had over, I think it was like 32 total offers. 32 total offers. And this became an Oklahoma-Texas battle at the end, but you had Florida, Ohio State, Miami, I believe Alabama offered him. Like, you had really big schools in his offer sheet, and usually the schools that you look for when you're looking for defensive linemen. But he was only a 4-star in the composite. When you look at his offer sheet and you look at what he was able to do on the field, like, you should have thought this guy was a top 100 player. And in the spring game, I felt like Jaden Jackson got a lot of hype, right? I felt like we were talking about him a little bit, and it kind of slipped away in the summer. But now that he's on this true freshman preseason All-American list, I feel like we got to talk about him a little more, because in the spring game, he had a total of 4 total tackles, and he's going to contribute in a big way on this defensive line, because this is a guy that I think you expect to get into that 320, 325 range to play a little bit on the interior, maybe even slide into the nose tackle position at 6'2". But Jaden Jackson is a guy that, when you watch the film and you specifically watched him in the spring game, one of the things that you notice that he is really able to do, and he does really well, is how he digs his foot into the ground and he gets up under those offensive linemen to generate that force on the edge of attack. Jaden Jackson is really, really, really good with that. So one of the things that Oklahoma really needs to look to utilize this upcoming season is Jaden Jackson. Like, they need to find ways to get him on the field, whether it's in a 3 or a 4-man front. I think Jaden Jackson, he's going to be able to produce for you in a big way. I think he's going to be able to produce for you in a bigger way than even David Stone will in his freshman year. But who else on the defensive line does Oklahoma really need to be paying attention to, or do Oklahoma fans need to be paying attention to? Because I think we all are familiar with Dominic Williams, right? The transfer from TCU, a guy that has been one of the best defensive linemen in the country, or DeJoun Terry, who was here last year playing nose tackle for you. I think we're familiar with those guys. I think you're familiar with the name Grayson Halton. I think a lot of people are excited to what he's going to be able to do for you, especially with what he was able to do in the spring game, coming up with 4 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and 1 sack. But I'm looking at guys that a lot of people are not talking about, right? Guys like an Ashton Sanders, who in the spring game, I think played pretty well for the opportunity he was given. He had a total of 2 tackles. You look at a guy like R. Mason Thomas, and although he's probably going to be more on the edge side, R. Mason Thomas is going to be able to help anchor in this defensive lineup a little bit. One guy that I don't think anybody's really talking about that you need to be talking about is Devon Sears. He has 3 sacks, or he has 3 tackles, 1 sack in that spring game, right? If you look at some of these defensive linemen, especially these interior guys, whether they're coming in as freshmen or whether they were here last year, I think you're going to start to see them kind of blossom a little bit. You're going to see them get a little bit more patient time. And I think you're probably 4 or 5 guys deep at this position, which is something I think we've been lacking here at Oklahoma. You've definitely been lacking the size that you currently now have in this room, where I don't think we have a single interior guy under 300 pounds. If I'm wrong, you guys are going to have to jump in the comments below and correct me on that. But this defensive line is crucial because, the trench play in the SEC, the trench play, even in the Big Ten, this is what wins you football games and what wins you a national championship. When we look at Oklahoma's chances to win a national championship, you look at defensive line and offensive line. Those are the 2 biggest topics, right? And I think we all look and hear about Oklahoma's defense being so improved. Everybody's talking about them potentially being a top 10 defense. And listen, I'm probably a little bit more on the pessimistic side. I think they're probably going to be about top 15. I'm not ready to say top 10 yet. I just need to see them get there before I can call that. But I don't think it's out of the question. And so when you hear that this defense is playing as well as they are in these scrimmages, in fall camps, and in practices against an offense that I think a lot of people need to remember. Although Jackson Arnold has supposedly had bad days, right, and this offensive line is a hodgepodge of players, you have to remember the skill players on the offensive side of the ball are really, really good. And Jackson Arnold is having to go up against supposedly one of the best defenses in the country. And if that's the case, then this offense is pretty dang good. And that means the defense is really dang good. Now, when you look at the defensive line, though, and you look at what impact these guys have to have, you need DeJoun Terry and you need Dominic Williams to be your 1A and 1B guys. Like, those guys have to be your anchor starters. But looking at the rotation of, whether it's second string or third string interior defensive line guys, I mean, Halton, you've got Ashton Sanders, Marcus Strong. I'm curious to see where David Stone plays. All right. We just haven't heard the hype around David Stone as much as we have Jayden Jackson. And so I'm really curious to see what he is this upcoming season, or does he take a whole year to develop? The one thing I want everybody to remember, though, is Jayden Jackson and David Stone played at IMG Academy, and IMG Academy produces a lot of NFL talent, but a lot of college talent, right? A lot of college-ready players. So Jayden Jackson and David Stone, the offensive line that they were going up against IMG Academy is going to, in 2026 and 2027, produce maybe a 5-star kid, but a bunch of high-tier 4-star kids, right? They're going up against college-ready talent day in and day out, which that might be why Jayden Jackson is getting the talk right now, right? Getting that conversation of potentially being a crucial role piece for Oklahoma in this defense and on this defensive line, because he's played against some top tier talent day in and day out. He's going to be a little bit more prepared than, let's say, a guy like Marcus Strong or Ashton Sanders that you got out of 2023, who maybe take a year or two to develop, but the staff really likes those guys. And then, like I said, I think your hidden factor, right? The piece that if he blossoms, Oklahoma is going to just, I think they're going to be really, really, really good, and that's Devon Sears, right? I think him coming in last year, a lot of people were kind of they weren't as sold on him, weren't as sold on high of the take of Devon Sears to the portal. I think a lot of people are going to be drawing back those questions when you see Devon Sears play this year. I think he's over 300 pounds. That's a guy that, as long as he's got the right technique and he can drive, right, and he can get up underneath those offensive linemen and drive them backwards, like, he's going to be a crucial piece of this defensive line. So as far as the defensive line goes, I'm not going to say it's the strongest in this team for Oklahoma, but it's probably a top 3 or 4 room for Oklahoma on this team this year. It's going to be one of the strong points. And you look at it for the defense, it is so key for this defensive line to play well. If they're able to clog up those holes, congest those lanes a little bit, Oklahoma is going to be one of the top, not only teams in terms of yards allowed, but they're not going to be giving up very many points this year if this defensive line is playing as well as we expect them to. So if you guys have made it this far and you have not already, I want to hear from y'all. So join the discussion, jump down in the comments below, give me your thoughts on Jayden Jackson being named to a true freshman All-American team by ESPN. And if you guys have not already, make sure you hit that like, hit that subscribe button. Hey, and turn on the notification bell so that you guys know when I post more videos. Football season is right around the corner, so videos are going to become a little more prevalent. Content is going to be heavy.